Let us get started here. So as I mentioned, we'll be using that chat throughout. So go ahead, put any questions you have in there. And we're excited to hear our chat today on social health. So with that, if we can pop over to the next slide here, I am Megan Allers, head of community here at Marco Polo, and I'll be moderating our conversation today. This is actually our second public event for Marco Polo, and we hope to have many more on this as well. So if you're not familiar with Marco Polo, you might be asking yourself, why is a video chat app hosting an event around social health and the importance of relationships? And the reason all comes down to our purpose. It's the reason why I've been working at Marco Polo for over 8 years now and absolutely love doing so. Our company purpose has always been to help people feel close. In fact, before we even had the Marco Polo video chat app, we knew that we wanted to help people feel close to those who matter to them most. And I think this is what really sets us apart. You see, every decision we make about the business, the product, the design, all has this purpose at the core. And so we know that there was a grant study at Harvard Medical School. That's the longest study on happiness that's ever been conducted. And it says when it comes to happiness, you can have all the things, a great career, money, good physical health, but without strong, supportive relationships, you'd be unhappy. And essentially, 80 years of data boils down to just one thing. Relationships are the only things that matter. That's huge, let that sink in. And, our purpose was born from happiness research like this. When our founders, Vlada and Michał Bortnik, thought about what kind of impact they wanted to have on the world as tech entrepreneurs, they thought about their own family and the example they wanted to set for their daughters. And they landed on happiness, the simple, scientifically verified truth that feeling close to your people makes you happier. And so with that, our app came next. And so that's not the whole story, though, the importance of relationships, which is why we're here today, joined by Kasley Killam, an award-winning author, renowned expert on social health. Kasley, I have to say, when our team read your book, The Art and Science of Connection, it was like we were reading the blueprint and the reason behind founding our company. And we knew we needed to do an event with you. We were going back and forth just before this. I've especially loved some little nuggets in there around the connection that you did that I've actually started implementing and recommending to friends. So I'm so excited for the chat today. So without further ado, Kasley, will you go ahead and introduce yourself to our community here?
Sure. Thank you so much, Megan. I've been so looking forward to this event. And thank you, everyone joining from all these different countries. We've got some fellow Canadians. I live in California now, but I'm from Vancouver originally. So nice to see some of you joining. And yeah, so like Megan said, I am the author most recently of the book, The Art and Science of Connection. But I've been really studying, sharing, applying the art and science of human connection for over a decade. It's truly my passion. I studied solutions for loneliness at the Harvard School of Public Health and have worn a lot of different hats in terms of how to apply the research insights in our lives. And in fact, back in 2013, I started an app that was all about taking research insights and helping sharing them with people in ways that they could use in their everyday life. And that was around when you guys were founded too. So it's pretty cool to see. I mean, these were some of the first apps, and mine is now long extinct, but yours has persisted and grown into this beautiful community. So it's really neat to see that that commitment to spreading connection using technology in rewarding ways. So today we are going to do 3 things together. The first is that we are going to explore what is this thing called social health? Why should you care? What's some of the research behind it, which Megan kicked us off with. Second, we are going to walk through a 3-step process for how to actually assess your social health in kind of a quick way. And then lastly, we are going to go through a few tips for how to strengthen your social muscles. And I saw lots of you in the chat saying that that was what you were interested in. So I got you, and let's dig right in. So first off, what is social health? Why should you care about this topic? Well, I want to start answering that question by inviting you to reflect on what you do to be healthy, right? When you think about taking care of your health, if you follow the advice of doctors, of health blogs, of wellness influencers to a T, and you do all things, let's say you walk 10,000 steps a day, you get 8 hours of sleep at night, you drink 2 liters of water a day, right? You manage your stress through therapy or meditation or similar practices. Let's say you do all those things, that's going to improve your physical and mental health without question, but only up to a point, right? And the problem with traditional health advice is that it misses one of the most important ingredients, which is human connection. And so now at this point, we have decades of research, like Megan shared, showing that disconnection is actually really harmful, not just for our emotions, not just for feeling badly, but also actually for our bodies. So, for example, studies have shown that people who are isolated or lonely on a chronic basis are 2 times more likely to develop depression. They have a 50% higher risk of dementia, a 32% higher risk of stroke, and at the very extreme end, a 29% higher risk of premature death. So these are just a few statistics. Isolation and loneliness are also linked to things like anxiety, high blood pressure, inflammation, diabetes, weaker immune systems, and so on. So it's clear that our social lives and the interactions we have with other people in our relationships are actually infiltrating our bodies. Now, of course, the flip side of all of that is that connection is really healthy, right? So, as one example, people with strong sense of community belonging are more than 2.5 times likely to report good or excellent health. And like I mentioned, it's also linked to longevity. So, connection is truly life giving. There was one study that was one of the first studies to really comprehensively look at this back in the 70s. The researchers followed nearly 7,000 people for 9 years. What they found during that almost decade of time following this group of people was that men who had fewer social and community ties were twice as likely to die in that time period. And women were closer to 3 times more likely to pass away if they were less connected. This was true regardless of how healthy they were at the start of the study, regardless of things like their socioeconomic status and different behaviors like whether they smoked, whether they were obese, whether they drank alcohol, whether they made use of preventive healthcare services. So this is really shocking and alarming. When I first read this, I could barely believe it. It essentially means that people were 2 to 3 times more likely to pass away regardless of their other health habits if their relationships were lacking. So this means that we need to take this seriously, right? Truly, our relationships are not a nice to have, they are essential. And so while this study is a little bit alarming, I also want to assure you that there's so much we can do to strengthen our social muscles and to improve our connections, even if you are at a time in your life when you're feeling isolated or lonely. And we're going to explore some of those today. So you might kind of wonder, why is it that there are these health benefits to connection and health risks to disconnection? And one aspect of it is physiological. So it's actually coming into our bodies in a really interesting way. So one study I loved that kind of demonstrated this was where researchers followed a group of people for 2 weeks and then they exposed them to a cold virus. Don't know why anyone opted to partake in this study, but I'm glad they did because the finding was really interesting. They found that people who had a stronger sense of social support and who hugged more frequently actually were less likely to catch the cold. And if they did, they had fewer symptoms. So, truly, our relationships provide this resilience by boosting our immune systems, by reducing things like inflammation and cortisol that stress out our bodies and lead to long-term risks for exposure to illness and disease. Another component of all of this is more practical, right? So there were quite interesting studies that came out during COVID-19 here in the US, but also in countries around the world that found that the communities where people had strong social ties in place already, they actually had fewer cases of COVID-19 and fewer deaths from COVID-19. So again, what we're seeing is that having that supportive network in place was a source of resilience. It meant that people could rely on each other and help each other out and share information about where to get vaccines or things like that. And so both physiologically and practically, connection and these relationships in place are really important for our health and our resilience. So, what all this means, tying it all together, is that health is not just physical and mental like we typically talk about. Health is actually also social. And in fact, you can't be fully healthy and you can't fully thrive if you don't have a name to write down as your emergency contact. Or if you only see friends, or family for a few hours over the holidays, if you don't have close relationships with people who you can share experiences with. And another takeaway from all this is that we can think about connection as being like exercise. It's an essential part of a healthy lifestyle. And in the same way that you might prioritize, exercising a few times a week or getting quality sleep at night, it's really important that we also prioritize connection. So, the framing that I like to use to think about this and tie it all together and to give connection the credibility and the prominence that it deserves is to think about social health as a separate dimension. Social health is the part of your overall health and well being that comes from connection. So, if you think about your physical health as being about your body, and your mental health as being about your mind, social health is about your relationships. And thinking of your overall health as this temple, these are different pillars that support it up and hold it together. And it's so crucial that we think of social health as a separate pillar rather than thinking of connection as something that's just part of mental health, because we've seen it's about so much more. And because the actions that we actually take to improve our social health might be different from ones that we take to improve our physical and mental health. So we can use this kind of analogy of your health as a temple and this social pillar as this crucial piece that too often gets overlooked to help guide our actions going forward. So just to drill this further in a different way, let's really separate these out. Now, of course, physical, mental, and social pillars are all interconnected and they combine their strength to support your overall health. But thinking of them separately again can just be helpful in terms of what you need to do. So, physical health is about your body. Some of the goals that we have with our physical health might be to be really strong physically, to avoid disease or illness. And some of the ways that we go about that are to exercise regularly to get a good night's sleep. With mental health, this is really about your mind. And so, some of the goals we strive for with mental health is emotional well being and the absence of distress, being able to manage stress. Some of the ways that we might go about this are things like meditation and therapy and journaling. And then there's this social pillar, and this is about your relationships. And some of the goals that you might have here are to feel connected, to feel supported, the absence of loneliness and isolation, right? And some of the ways you might go about this are through regular interaction or through volunteering and through other things that we're going to talk about today. So, with that kind of general framing in mind, you have a little bit of a base for understanding what social health is and why it's important. Let's talk about how you can actually assess your social health. And we're going to run through an exercise that's kind of adapted from chapter 2 in my book. And you are going to need a piece of paper and a pen, or you can use a Google Doc, a Word doc if you're on your computer. If you actually have the book, there's a worksheet on, I believe, page 58, so you can pull that out. But while you're getting that ready, whatever you're going to use to write this down, it's helpful to realize that we don't often kind of take stock of our relationships. If you go to a doctor and you're having health issues and you're trying to figure out what it is, they might first tell you to keep a diary of what you eat and how well you sleep and all these different metrics at first to kind of understand over a week-long period, for example, what's going on in your life that might be contributing to how you're feeling. And so this is a similar way of doing that. Let's take stock of your relational landscape in order to assess your social health. So if you have that pen and paper ready, the step one is to write down the names of the people in your life who are either most important to you or who you interact with most often. Those might not be the same, right? We interact with our coworkers a lot. They might not be the most important people to us. And so think about who are the people who are most important to you and who do you see most often? We're going to take 1 minute to write this down. And this isn't about writing down everyone you know, right? It's not all your relatives. You're not making a wedding guest list. This is just about the people who are most important to you and the people who you interact with most often. And we're going to take 1 minute right now to write down those names. I'm going to set a timer. Don't overthink it. Don't worry if it's short. Don't worry if it's long. There's no judgment. And your 1 minute starts right now. I'm going to do it too. Okay, so 1 minute is up. Don't worry if you didn't complete it. You can always come back to this later, but just stick with the list that you have for now. And now we're going to move to step 2. So step 2 is to rate your satisfaction with each of those connections. You are not rating the person. That's not what I'm asking you to do. Instead, it's reflecting on whether you feel like that relationship is healthy, is positive, is on track. So some of the questions that you can ask yourself to get at that are, is this relationship mutual and meaningful? Am I as close to this person as I want to be? Do I interact with this person as often as I would like? So if the answer is yes, if you feel really satisfied with where that relationship is at this stage in your life, you're going to put a check mark. If you're kind of yes, no, neutral, put a little squiggly line next to their name. And if no, maybe you don't see them as much as you'd like, or you don't feel as close as you would like, or it doesn't feel totally mutual, meaningful, put an X. And so now we're going to go through and just take 1 minute to put those symbols next to the names of folks. Okay, so now we are going to move on to the next step. Again, you can always come back to this later if you're not fully done reflecting on them. The final step in this 3-step process is to decide on your overall strategy, optimizing both the quantity and quality of connection in your life right now. So I'm going to walk you through this. The first strategy is to stretch. So if you're looking at your list and you're thinking, this is way shorter than I want, there aren't as many people as I would like to reach out to. I don't feel like I have that many friends, or like I don't socialize as often as I want. in that case, your strategy is to stretch. So just like we stretch our physical muscles to become more flexible, we can stretch our social muscles by meeting new people, making new friends, joining new communities. Okay, so this is about optimizing the quantity. The second strategy is to rest. So if you're looking at your list and you think this is too long and I'm actually overwhelmed by how many people and relationships I'm trying to keep track of, or if you feel like actually it's just right and this is the kind of amount that feels fulfilling for me personally, then your strategy is to rest. So just like we rest our physical muscles to actually let our bodies recover in between workouts, in between reps, you can also let your social muscles rest by really focusing on the connections that matter most to you, prioritizing those and not worrying about others. Now, the third strategy is about optimizing the quality of connection in your life. So, if you are looking at your list and next to the names you have mostly X's or wavy lines, that means you have an opportunity to tone your social muscles. So, just like we tone our physical muscles to strengthen our bodies, we can tone our social muscles by becoming closer to the people in your life, right? By actually deepening those relationships. So, that's to tone. And lastly, if you look at your list and you've got lots of check marks, mostly check marks, your strategy is to flex. So just like we flex our physical muscles to kind of show off our strength, we can flex our social muscles by enjoying the benefits of connection with the people in our lives. We can work on sustaining those relationships and continually investing them in the long term. Okay. So I know that's a lot of information and you can always come back to this. You're going to have the recording if you need. But at this moment in time, I'd love for some of you to share in the chat if you feel comfortable. What is your strategy right now? What do you need to work on? And you might have more than one. You might have one for quantity, one for quality, or there might be just one strategy overall that feels like the opportunity for you to really strengthen your social muscles and optimize your social health overall. So we've got one person saying rest. Great. Awesome. And we've got others coming in. All right. We've got quite the mix. Flex, stretch. Awesome. So what this tells us too, and the fact that so many of us could be at different stages of our life, is that social health ebbs and flows, right? In the same way that your physical and mental health ebb and flow over time, and you go through periods where you're physically and mentally strong and periods where you're not, periods of difficulty. That also is true for social health, and that's okay. So right now, your strategy might be one of these, and then a year from now, it might be something completely different. Yeah, I'm loving all these comments coming in. Awesome. So with that in mind, we are going to move forward into some quick tips to strengthen your social muscles and actually go about some of those strategies. We don't have time to go into all of the recommendations that I have. There's lots more in my book. But what I wanted to do is take some time to go over 3 tips that apply to us all that hopefully are useful regardless of which of those strategies is most prominent for you right now. Okay. And specifically, these are ways to integrate social health into your life because let's face it, we're all busy. I'll raise my hand. I feel busy. Sometimes, it's hard to prioritize connection with the people I love just because I'm so caught up in work and trying to keep on top of my day to day. But I take comfort in the fact that there's so much research showing that even really simple steps and small gestures can make a really meaningful difference. So, for example, there was a study that found that even a simple text message saying, "Hey, thinking of you, hope you're doing well," maybe sharing a photo, just a warm outreach like that, can measurably improve how connected people feel. We underestimate how much that means to other people. Similarly, another study found that just 10-minute phone calls a few times a week measurably reduced loneliness in a group of people. Okay, so even these really simple gestures can be profound. So, how do we go about that? One recommendation is to go for connection first. So, let me explain what I mean by this. When you are standing in line waiting for something or you have, a few minutes before your next meeting starts, what's the first thing you do? Well, I'll answer honestly, pull out my phone, scroll on social media, scroll through some news headlines, right? I think a lot of us can relate to that. Um, or similarly, driving in your car, taking the bus, right? Riding the metro. We often do things like put our headphones in and listen to a podcast or listen to a playlist with songs. So my recommendation is to go for connection first. When you're standing in line waiting and you have a couple minutes, instead of scrolling on your phone, text a friend, right? Reach out and say, hey, I'm thinking of you. Send them a photo of something you snapped recently. When you're commuting in the car and you go to put in that podcast, call a family member, call a friend first, right? If they don't answer, you can put in the podcast, but go for connection first so that you're weaving it into your days and into your routine in ways that are kind of feasible. The second recommendation is to give the presence of your presence. So again, if you have a busy life, you've already got your routine, you're juggling a lot, this is about being present when you are with other people. So when you're preparing dinner for your family in the evening, with your family in the evening, right? Or when you're sitting across from a coworker at lunch, instead of being distracted on our phones or, worrying about a deadline that we have coming up, just being present and actually looking them in the eyes, listening, asking questions, and being present for those moments where we're already connecting with someone and yet it's so easy to be distracted. So that's the second recommendation. The third is to make a to-love list. Okay, so we all know to-do lists. I feel like they dominate my life, but a profound and simple way to prioritize social health in your day-to-day is to make a to-do list, or to-love list rather, okay? So this is who on a given day or a given week or a given month do you want to make sure you're nurturing your connections with? You already have a head start because we went through that exercise. So what I'd like you to do is to choose 3 names from the list that you wrote down earlier and have that be your to love list over the next week. That means that you reach out to those 3 people, you call them if they live in a different place, maybe you schedule time together with them if they live in your city, right? You do something to nurture those relationships with those 3 people. That is your to love list for this week. And I encourage you to do it every week. It's it's a simple but meaningful way to make sure that you're prioritizing and integrating social health into your day to day. So if you'd like, feel free to share one or all 3 of the people on your to love list this week. It's a way to have some accountability and commit to it, commit to the fact that you will reach out and engage with those people this week. So while you're thinking about that, and perhaps if you'd like to sharing some of those in the chat, we are close to our time. So I will say that there's lots more fun tips in my book, The Art and Science of Connection. This was kind of a palette teaser in terms of some of the ideas that the book explores in a lot more detail. So if you're interested, I think you will definitely like that as well. And I'd love to stay connected. This is a topic that I explore in my newsletter, and I love hearing from you about what works in your life, what questions you have about social health, and so on. And so we are actually going to take some time now to do some Q&A. And I think Megan will join us back to help facilitate that as you guys are sharing some of your to love list people.
Such great actionable tips on this. I was following along. I've got my list here and I was reading as our chat was going on here. A number of people are talking about looking for connection with neighbors. They've moved to new areas. And I know we were talking about that a little bit. Could you share some tips for maybe making some new connections in your neighborhood or in your community?
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, so I will say, I have moved quite a few times. I've lived in, I think, 12 cities in 3 countries, which is a lot. And so I've faced this problem myself many times, and it can be challenging, right? Or even if you've lived in a place for a long time, sometimes the social norms in our culture are such that we don't get to know our neighbors at all. So something I did when I moved to the community I live in now in Southern California was I actually handwrote notes and dropped them off in the mailboxes of everyone on my street and planned a potluck block party for folks, which was literally as simple as saying, "Hey, on this day at this time, come to this spot on our street." bring some food if you want. I'm going to have hot chocolate. We're going to, bring a chair. We're just all going to hang out. It was that simple, right? It didn't require money. It didn't require any other planning beyond that. And I found that people really appreciated the notes. And it was a way to just kick off that conversation, right? And kind of to raise my hand and say, hey, I'd love to get to know you. We're new here. How's it going? So something as simple and fun as that. But there's also research showing that even smiling and waving and chit-chatting with your neighbors helps people feel more connected to the community and less alone. So it really can be that simple. And I find that very empowering to think about even those small steps that each of us can take.
I love the idea of writing handwritten notes. I was saying earlier before the call started that I recommended that to my sister as well. I know for me personally, also, there was new pickleball courts put up in our community, and I started going down and playing and started having casual conversation with neighbors that live in different buildings that I never would have had before. Maybe walking by in the street, I wouldn't maybe pick up a conversation in that way, but through like mutual interest, I also felt like it gave us this commonality to then have greater conversations. So I feel like that has been a good one for me as well.
I love that. I recently took up pickleball as well, which
Oh,
is surprisingly so much fun. So
yeah.
I'm on that train too.
Another question coming in, someone said like what three feels like overwhelming to me to add on my to
Mhm.
love list. And we're all so busy.
Yeah.
Can you talk to us a little bit about maybe working up to that three or ideas of where to start?
Totally. Or just do one. That's okay, right? I actually think I might have a slide on this, but something that I think is really important to note is that the quantity of connection that's right for you varies depending on your personality. So I'm an introvert, which might surprise a lot of people. I'm an introvert. What does that mean? It doesn't mean that I'm antisocial and that I hate people. It just means that I need less connection on a day-to-day basis, right? I love solitude. I have no problem spending long periods alone. And then when I'm with other people, I really love sharing that connection. And so the amount of time you spend socializing on a given day or in a given week or month or year might be different depending on your personality. And let me see if I think I might have a slide on this. I actually, in my book, there are these four social health styles based on this idea that the quantity and quality of connection that's right for each of us varies. And so I highlight four different styles: butterfly, a wallflower, an evergreen, and a firefly. And I was fortunate to collaborate with the New York Times on a quiz for assessing which one of those you are, but also there's lots on this in the book as well. So that's kind of a way of thinking about this. So if three feels overwhelming to you, don't worry about it. Start with one, right? The point is really that we need to be proactive and intentional about our social health in the same way that we are about our physical and mental health.
That's awesome. I'm definitely surprised to know that you're an introvert, a queen of
I know.
connection. That's so awesome.
I
Um,
think introversion to a lot of people means shy, but it's really about energy. So I recharge in solitude. I'm clearly not shy. I'm talking to you all right now. And I love talking to new people. But it's about recharging my batteries, which I definitely need alone time for. Mhm.
Love that. Some
Mhm.
people were also talking about questions or conversation starters to go deeper in those relationships,
Mhm.
asking more like open-ended questions of like, what's bringing you joy this week? What are you looking forward to? Curious if you have any favorite questions to kind of ask to go deeper in your relationships.
I love that. Well, I love those ones. Those are great suggestions. Yeah, I have a section on this in my book as well because I love this. I'm one of those people who has conversation card decks like on my kitchen table, on my dining room table, like everywhere that I can. I love using prompts like that. Someone asked me one recently that I hadn't been asked before and that I really love. There were two questions. So the first was, what do you love most about your partner if you're in a relationship? And second, what do you love most about yourself? Which I
Mhm.
thought was really interesting because we usually don't talk about what we love about ourselves or even necessarily think about that. But it was a very cool way. We both shared answers with each other, and it was a cool way to get to know each other in a different way. So that's a recent one that I just learned and had a really cool experience with.
I love that. When I'm meeting new people, love to ask the question of like, what are you really passionate about? And it leads to some interesting conversations too, not just like, what do you do for work kind of a thing, but what really brings you joy is also a great.
Yeah, if you challenge yourself to avoid how are you and what do you do, first of all, it's hard,
Yeah.
but second of all, it pushes you in a direction of having deeper conversations and getting to know people in different ways. And so that's a fun challenge for anyone who might want to, right? Like try for 1 week to not ask how are you or what do you do for work, and see what kinds of conversations you end up having instead.
We have some people asking, are there any book clubs for people looking to read your book and connect? Where can people go or maybe start their own if they're looking to do this?
I love this question. Yes, absolutely. Start a book club. This is something that's come up recently, and I know I need to create a book club guide for people. But yeah, do it. Get some friends together, get some neighbors together, perhaps. I know local libraries often have book clubs, so you can suggest it to your local library. That's also a great way for them to do all the organizing, and then you get to show up and meet new people that way. So yeah, I think given that the book is literally about connection, it's a great tool for connection and for sparking conversations with people. So I am a big fan of book clubs.
Yeah, and Crystal, you just mentioned, we have people doing book clubs on Marco Polo as well for that virtual connection for those friends that maybe aren't as close. Creating a Marco Polo group, maybe reading a topic every week, popping in, having a conversation on what was your key takeaways, could be another great option there.
Love it. Love it.
Well, this has been just a great talk today. Thank you so much, Kasley, for coming on board and sharing all of these insights. For those of you who were able to get your free copy of Art and Science and Connection, we hope you enjoy it. And we will be sending out an email after this session today with a replay of the webinar so you can go back on your list and work with those actionable insights to help your social health. Thank you so much to all those who joined us live today for your interaction. If you're enjoying the replay, we hope it's just as impactful for you. And we're really glad to be putting on an event like this, so closely aligned with our purpose of helping people feel close. This feels like a match made in heaven. So thank you so much for being here with us today and sharing all your great insights.
Thank you, Megan. Thank you, Marco Polo team. Thank you to everyone who joined in different cities and different countries. And thank you for gifting 50 copies to the first registrants. That's exciting. I hope those of you who got them enjoy.
Yes. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
Bye.